ultimately perhaps even drugs and suicide.
Leif Garrett, who began acting at age 5, made his first impression on the entertainment world as he appeared in the Walking Tall trilogy of films beginning in the early 70s. The adoration from teen fans was almost instantaneous.
It started out at 13. You know, from 13 to 22, you know, there's a huge admiration thing going on, and it plays with your senses, you know?
That to me is a sensitive subject, because for a lot of child stars, you hear stories and you see them on the news frequently of just hitting the basement. And for me, it's always been a balancing act and realizing what's important in life and trying not to go to the places where I think teen child fame can take you.
Because I never really had a chance to think about it. It was given to me, handed to me on a platter. Like, hey, do you want to do this? It's like, yeah, you know?
I believed that that the career would just start at one place and then just continually climb. There would never be a dip or a valley or a slowdown. And of course, that's not very realistic.
Everybody loves you. You can do no wrong. You're a great kid. And when that magic carpet ride is over, it plays games with your head.
It really does play with you, you know, because it's when it starts going away, it becomes somewhat difficult unless you get things into perspective.
When the Brady thing became yesterday's news, but I still wanted a career and I was used to things coming my way, it was extremely humbling.
Your phone calls are not being returned. You literally cannot get arrested in town. You are labeled, you're a teen idol. And the record companies are looking for the next teen idol, not someone who was a teen idol 2 years ago.
Probably not until, like, the second record did I finally catch on, you know, almost turning 16, finally catch on that, like, wait a minute, they're not really looking, you know, for my quote-unquote talent as much as they are image.
All of a sudden, I had to look inward and myself and kind of pick up some of the slack that I hadn't paid attention to as I grew up. And I think that's where I first began to really, really develop and really grow and really find out about myself and really start making choices. Because I realized if I was going to stay in the business, it wasn't going to happen to me. I had to go after it. And going after it created a rededication, I think.
But the effect it's had on me over the years is that no matter how successful I've been or haven't been on various projects, because I've worked behind the scenes in the music business, it's always made me feel like I can never achieve that level of success that I had when I was famous. However wrong that may be, that feeling, and it's taken me through a roller coaster ride where sometimes I'm extremely depressed and I have to get over it and go, well, wait a second, that's totally ridiculous. It was a great moment in my life.
I definitely went through a weird period where I got involved in substance abuse, and it's been well publicized. But you know, that sort of stuff happens.
But yeah, it does have an effect on you throughout your entire life.
I would do everything I've done again. I don't regret anything I've done because I like who I am and I like where I'm at now. I'm just glad I was able to get through it. But, you know, there's periods in people's lives where they've got to do that. And, you know, you have to experience things firsthand, or you have to, like, be lost for a while to find yourself.
It's electric.
When we return, screaming for some new kids on the block.
You're watching Trio Hot Summer Nights. Trio Hot Summer Nights. All music, all month.
Rick Springfield, who had experienced a certain amount of teen worship through the 70s, once again found himself in the spotlight in the early 80s as he juggled a career as a soap star on General Hospital with a recording career that carried him to the heights of pop stardom.
I used to feel the rush of the energy. I mean, I remember we did a show actually in Germany with U2 in like '85, and you know, like the Nürburgring, one of those ones where there were like 250,000 people, and truly, I felt like I was on the moon. I felt lighter just because of the pure energy of the number of people. We were an insecure species, and to suddenly have a bunch of people out of nowhere suddenly, you know, scream your acclaim, it's very heady, and you know, and nobody is unaffected by it. After a while, you get used to it, and it starts to become you know, a distraction, and then it starts to become kind of a burden, you know. And that's, from a couple of people I've spoken who've gone through it, there seems to be a very similar kind of feeling. And then when it goes away, you know, you miss it. It's kind of it's a pathetic human trait, you know.
Like Rick Springfield, Rex Smith has seen many sides of the entertainment world, from heavy metal rock and roller to actor, from Broadway star to host of the TV music show Solid Gold. It was his acting, though, and a little movie titled Sooner or Later that ultimately thrust him into the teen idol twilight zone.
It was a Sunday night movie on NBC, and Monday I went to Bloomingdale's because I had Mondays off, theater schedule, and I was going to go buy a shirt. And I remember seeing Bill Cosby in Bloomingdale's, and I heard people starting to scream, and I went, oh man, Bill Cosby, wherever he goes, people screaming, what kind of life is that? And then 5-10 minutes later, I was locked in a dressing room with 300-400 girls screaming, and the police came, and they were going, who are you? And I said, I'm not sure what's going on. There was a movie on last night, may have something to do with it.
In retrospect, these incidents of fan hysteria have their amusing side, but in reality, they could make for some pretty hairy moments.
I was in Detroit, and I had done a show, and at this theater, that there was a fire escape going up to the dressing rooms, and sure enough, I was in the shower after the concert, and some girls had climbed on top of girls, whatever, and pulled that ladder down, and my whole dressing room filled with girls dressed in their Sunday finest, you know, but they didn't care, climbing the thing. They get me out, I'm running through the theater out the front door in a panic. There was a police car, a lone cruiser, and I flagged it down. The cruiser, I was so desperate, obviously, the cruiser pulled up on the sidewalk, and they go, yeah, kind of sitting there, and I go, listen, you guys don't know me, but there's a mob around the back of this theater, and if anything happens, I'm going to need some help. And they're going, yeah, right. And then just one little figure just went, hey, and then another one, hey, hey, wow. And this mob, this mass, I said, open the car, let me in. And the guy went, you better get in. And I jumped in the back, and they shut me in, and we rolled up the windows, and this mob covered the police car, all in their Sunday finest. I mean, you were looking at, you know, there wasn't, these girls were dressed to the nines, but they were rocking that car. Just, you couldn't see out of the windows anymore. It was just pressed faces. And I started to see the negative side of doing just teen press. I hadn't never been exposed to before, and I suddenly started seeing the downside of having me photographed half naked with a cuddly little pink rabbit in my arms. I can tell you the moment when I knew I'd had enough. I was checking into a hotel, and a car backfired, or there was somebody, hey, or something like that. Anyway, I got over the counter, the registration counter, and I was hiding by the knees of the register, or the hotel clerk. And I realized at that moment that I'd had enough.
One of the occupational hazards of stardom is the over-the-top enthusiasm of fans who can sometimes put the star's health, as well as their own, at risk. Over the years, the demand for tougher security and personal bodyguards has increased dramatically. One of the first of this new breed of celebrity minders was Alf Weaver, known as the first rock and roll bodyguard, whose clients have included the Beatles, Bob Geldof, Frank Sinatra, the Monkees, and Madonna. He once had occasion to transport her in the back seat of his own car, covered by one of his dog's blankets to keep her from the viewfinders of the paparazzi.
And all of a sudden she said, can I come out of here? This blanket stinks. And I said, oh, sorry, and took the blanket off, and we got through to the film set. And but I've met her a few times after, and we always have a laugh about that.
Madonna, who paved the way for the female teen idols that were soon to emerge, was one of the first artists to make the medium of video her own. Also given a major career boost by the video boom of the 80s were other image-conscious, teen-friendly artists of the day, like Wham, featuring George Michael.
I was the hugest Wham fan, and it was not very cool to like Wham in junior high school and high school. It was kind of the, you know, poppier alternative to liking, let's say, Duran Duran. But I was the hugest fan of not only George's bleach blonde hair and white teeth, but but his songwriting ability and his producing ability. I just was like, oh my God, this guy does everything by himself, and he's so young.
Unlike most starstruck fans, Debbie Gibson, already somewhat of a musical child prodigy, also took George Michael's career accomplishments to heart as part of her own career inspiration. Ultimately, she would emerge as a songwriter, recording artist, performer, producer, and eventually teen idol herself. Lest you believe that all outrageous behavior aimed at pop music idols is reserved for adolescent girls, Deborah Gibson can recall a time when the tables were turned.
One of the funnier things a male fan did was walk naked for about 5 miles down a dirt road leading to my house, and he jumped over the fence naked and knocked on the door, and my grandmother answered. I actually was out of the country at the time, so it was a pretty wild phone call we got from Grandma that day.
Deborah Gibson's control over most elements of her career, even at such a young age, was the exception rather than the rule. Colonel Tom Parker, Bob Marcucci, Brian Epstein, and Maurice Starr are legendary for their keen instinct for teen tastes. Lou Pearlman joined that fraternity in the 90s as he launched the careers of such chart-topping acts as NSYNC, the Backstreet Boys, O-Town, and Natural.
Well, you know, making this whole thing work is a very tedious process. You need to have great record partners, great management that handles groups, and making sure that you have the right public relations, and having radio airplay and television exposure, media, and so forth, and also great concert promoters. And that's all part of making it happen. And having great record partners are having great songs introduced, and you have to go through and weed out the songs from different songwriters.
The songwriter will come up with a creative idea. Publisher's job is to take the creative idea and get somebody to record it in very simple terms. What you actually have to do is find the right time and the right place to be able to play it, either for a record company person or a manager or an artist. Sometimes you can play the same song 2 or 3 times and somebody will ultimately go, yeah, I really like it.
It's all about the songs, actually, because you get to familiarize yourself with the artist later. If you don't like the song, you're not going to get into the artist. And in our business, it's also luck. Once you hear it on the radio and you get to see the artist and you like them, being that we're in the young market, it's great because, you know, kids adapt and they like what they see and they like what they hear. And that's how they become not just fans, but fanatics.
There's a lot of boy bands, manufactured or not, that are basically, it's the teen experience taken to a whole new level. The record companies and managers and everybody have discovered the value behind hit records and what the power of a teenage girl monetarily will do for the business.
I think these days, you know, marketing and promotion to a certain extent have greater importance than the actual artist. And also with what's happened in technology in the last 15 years, anybody can actually sing a song. So you could take anybody off the street and they could make a record. I think what makes somebody last is when they've got substance and personality of their own that creates a charisma and a career.
Though one of the original boy bands was a Puerto Rican group Menudo, which gave us Ricky Martin and La Vida Loca, the man most responsible for the boy band explosion of the 90s and beyond was visionary music industry veteran Maurice Starr.
Maurice Starr was an interesting guy. He started with New Edition and, of course, developed New Kids on the Block.
I remember the first time I went into a flower shop and I heard this little white kid singing. And I said, hey, you want to be in a group? And I said, I'm, you know, Maurice Starr. He hadn't really heard of New Edition. So, and I said, well, here's my number. If you want to do this, give me a call. I got a call. It wasn't from him. It was from the FBI saying that, you know, why is this big black man giving little white boys his telephone number?
Starr found the 5 performers who were to become New Kids on the Block, beginning with Donnie Wahlberg.
He saw talent in me that, you know, I didn't take seriously. You know, I did a lot of dancing and rapping and stuff like that, and he saw it in me, and he took it serious. He saw that it could really work on a professional level, and I just, you know, being the person I am, being from the streets and stuff, I never really dreamed of doing nothing like that, so I didn't take my own talent seriously, but he made me focus my talent in the New Kids.
When my oldest was young, she loved the New Kids on the Block. In fact, that was the first group concert I took her to. The girls had so much fun. And I remember it was like this icy night, and I was worried about driving to it, but I thought, there's not going to be another New Kids on the Block. I got to get this kid there. And so we went, and she loved it.
It was time again. I mean, I don't think there had been a boy group since the Osmonds, really, and the Jackson 5. And I think that, like, every 10 years or so, teenagers demand their teen idols.
I just thought it was amazing what he had created. And I said, you know, gee, I'm into music. I think I could do something like that.
They kind of had it tough because they paved the way, in a sense, for NSYNC and Backstreet. And I've actually heard interviews where some of those guys put New Kids down and they say, oh, they made it harder for us because, you know, they weren't as polished, or because they lip-synced at times or whatever, and I think, how dare you? You know, they opened the door pretty recently, you know, just between 10 and 15 years ago. I think that they taught record companies how, once again, how to market the boy band.
She's an angel, now she's the monkey on my back. She has freedom, still she never left.
Compared to a lot of the bands out now, they actually have talent. Really? Yeah, they do. They write their own music, they play their own instruments.
We came all the way from Florida, Fort Lauderdale.
I should have told them that. See the Moffats.
My heart goes bang, bang, boom. When she walks into the room, my heart goes bang, 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 bang.
Bands like the Moffats, who have earned a sizable international teen following, bristle at any suggestion that they are not in complete creative control of their own destiny as artists.
You have to have the music to back it up, you know. It's a lot of bands are afraid of that because they rely on a producer to write for them, and then they don't have any say with what music they have on their albums and their videos and their fashion, whatever. So in our position, we have a lot of input. We record whatever we want. We write whatever we want. And yeah, we can be called teen idols or whatever you want to call us. We're a boy band. We're boys and we're a band.
My heart goes bang, bang, boom. When she walks into
Every time someone talks about Britney, oh, I love Britney Spears, I'm like, hey, look at this.
Picture. I'm taking a picture. I came from New York.
when she walks into the room.
I can't. I just start crying. I don't want to. So nice. They're really great together. I don't even think they stopped smiling.
Thank you. See you later.
Oh,
90s teen idols Hanson also squirm at the suggestion that market research has anything to do with the music they create.
We've had a lot of, you know, younger fans in the past, particularly. I think people ask us that question, like, do you target a certain fan audience? We never target. We never, like, you know, we really want, like, teen girls or we really want, you know, 30-year-old guys. It's just happens that certain people respond to music. So the last thing I ever want to do is be like, oh, we want this. We just want to play music and we just want to have people respond to it. And that is a very energetic, very on fire, passionate group of people.
Put a few thousand of those passionate, on-fire people who have heard that you have a taste for peanut butter in an audience and get ready to duck.
A plastic peanut butter jar. Like, we're playing this outdoor amphitheater. It was Red Rocks outside of Denver, Colorado. And the way that the audience is, they're at an extreme angle. And so people are very close to you. So they can throw things from a pretty good distance away and still get to you. I don't know where it came from, but I'm standing there singing this song, and all of a sudden, what's that? I mean, it got this close to just clobbering me.
This type of fan offering delivered Air Express to the stage is certainly nothing new to those in the teen idol fraternity.
I ran into the Beatles and I said, you know, they said they like jelly babies. And I go, well, what was the jelly babies thing? They said, well, you know, we just made it up at the time. So John said, be careful, say marshmallows, because they throw those jelly babies at you, and they hurt.
That is very true. Do not... We used to talk about this one particular jelly bean that we, like, used to eat and have in our dressing room, and people would just start chucking them. Or we went to Hershey's Stadium in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and they started chucking, like, Hershey's Kisses. These things were like bullets, you know.
And I said, okay, so we said marshmallows. And people used to throw marshmallows. You know, you can't throw a marshmallow very far, especially if you've got those girly throws. You know, and eventually they started putting, like, rocks inside these packages of marshmallows and throwing them on stage. So we did get the marshmallows. Thank you very much.
They would throw all kinds of books and cameras and LOVE
lead weights and everything, flowers and pens, and you'd just be things flying in the air, you know.
This exchange of gifts was not always a one-way street. A few of the artists would actually return the favor, all dressed.
We'd order pizzas, tons of pizzas, uncut pizzas, and we'd take pizzas and we'd throw them out like frisbees to the girls, and they'd fly out, you know, and then we'd sign our names and make airplanes and throw them. And
actually, Zach got in a full-out water war with someone that was in the audience. Like they kept squirting
we always
him.
win. I mean,
Zach
we
had
don't
these
lose.
massive
I mean, they've got
guns.
hoses and, you know, we have more resources than they do.
As the 21st century dawned, there were few pop artists in the world bigger than NSYNC. 5 personable, hard-working young men who were quick to learn the value of staying in touch with their devoted fans.
Every day we do meet and greets every day with our fans and stuff like that to make sure that, you know, some of the kids actually get to get in and really get a good look at what we do.
Originally put together in Orlando, Florida by pop promoter Lou Pearlman, the man who was also behind the Backstreet Boys' rise to fame, NSYNC would eventually cut those ties.
Trying to get somebody into the mindset of our group that hasn't really hung around us before or been with us. If you travel with us, I think you'll realize that it's not even about being a group. It's about a brotherhood, you know. It's like we take care of each other.
It's not like, you know, an audition was held, put us together, and, you know, maybe one of us might not like somebody in the group or something like that. And that probably has happened in other situations, but for us, we know each other, you know, everybody knew somebody in the group, we're really good friends.
Setting out on their own, they ultimately silenced many of their critics who had dismissed them as nothing more than a figment of someone else's show business imagination. Disparaging press coverage aside, the fans were never in doubt about the musical credibility of their hunky heroes.
We're here to see NSYNC, and because we love them.
Next, screaming for girl power.
You're watching. We're back with more Trio Hot Summer Nights. All music, all month.
Girl power, which really had its beginnings with artists like Madonna, Debbie Gibson, and Tiffany, really became a media catchphrase in the late 90s with the emergence of the Spice Girls from England. Sisters were doing it for themselves, and their female teen fans were loving it.
The Spice Girls was a strange one because it came along at the time when it was mostly boy bands, and no one really thought a girl band could come in and succeed, but they had such an attitude, and I think people thought they could be my mates, I can be like them. I think that was their appeal. But they also had the glamour as well. I mean, they all look great, but they look great in quite an accessible way. The kind of thing that you think, oh, maybe I could look like that if I tried.
Hey! Massive thank you to all of our fans in Chicago. You are the best. Excellent!
That phenomenon was fueled by really, really young girls, you know, and parents got all upset because they'd see their 6-year-olds dressing like tarts, they thought, because they were dressing like the Spice Girls. But again, I think that was a little different. They weren't falling in love with them in the same way, but they were kind of these sassy girls who were going out and doing their thing and talking about girl power. And I think very young girls, unlike even 10 years ago, a girl couldn't talk about girl power and have that be cool. But all of a sudden, it was cool.
The advertising community is becoming much more hip to the fact that these girls have a lot of money. They're influencing the decisions of families, you know, or when you're in the supermarket or buying a computer, and they're, in fact, making a lot of the decisions.
They're a huge factor in the business, in the marketing of a lot of pop music. They've got money to spend. They're buying all kinds of stuff. They're the ones who are driving the popularity of these groups.
As the Spice Girls faded from the headlines, it was Britney Spears' turn to give parents sleepless nights over the overtly sexual nature of her image. Of course, the young teens, many of them who were also fans of the boy bands, turned up in their thousands to scream their approval for Britney as well.
I think the whole reason why my career took off the way it did was because teenage girls looked at me and said, she's doing it, I can do it, we're the same age. We're from the same background.
Well, I think when girls get excited about female idols, it's a kind of envy, or a kind of, that is the person that I would like to be. So they engage in the fantasy of actually being that person. They live vicariously through them.
I think it's just such a close, it's almost like a sisterly connection, and they really feel like you're a part of their world and like you're speaking directly to them and you're speaking on their behalf to the masses. And so I think it's like a really close connection. There is a really close connection between female performers and their female fans.
Over the past decade, things have changed in the world of teen idols. Suddenly, it isn't just the boy bands and solo male stars getting the scream treatment, but also solo female singers, groups preaching girl power, and mixed-gender bands like S Club 7, the brainchild of Simon Fuller, the man behind the Spice Girls' rise to international stardom.
This is his water bottle he gave to me during the show.
What are you gonna do with
Well,
that?
it's the best. I took a drink and I sealed it up forever.
You get really thirsty.
I don't care. I'm so thirsty right now. I don't care. It's yours. It was awesome. It was the best. It was a dream come true. Whatever. I can't talk.
As we've seen, it's not often that the fans are tongue-tied. High-pitched screaming, wailing, and sobbing are more the order of the day in demonstrating their devotion to their idols. Call the behavior outrageous, bizarre, or even disturbing, but fan hysteria over the years has proven to be universal. If you listen to the stories, it truly is the scream heard round the world.
It really is universal. I mean, it's amazing how you can go to so many different countries, completely different cultures, and have the same response.
Because we're from England and you come over here, you don't expect people to, it's really weird, you just don't expect people to know you the way they do. You know, it's really weird when you turn up somewhere like Canada or in Asia especially, and people say your name, and it's like, how do you know my name? Oh, yeah.
Yo, have you even heard of us? How did you hear our name? We had one article in this magazine in Germany, that's it, and we had fans.
You go into a country where you think you won't be known, and all of a sudden, all the fans are there.
In Argentina, and there were all these fans, there were about 300 fans that were waiting out of the hotel 24/7. I mean, it was amazing. They were always there. We kept leaving at the back entrance because there was no way to do, like, to say hi to them safely. It was completely impossible.
But in Italy, I mean, fans get on their pop-pop bikes and follow the limousines. And I used to say they're going to be killed because they weren't looking where they were going. They was looking in the limousine as they were driving by, you know. And I said, God, they're going to get killed.
Tokyo was incredible because when we got to the airport in Japan, we heard a commotion, screaming and all the... We thought there was a riot or a fire. Being naive, we were like, what's the problem? Something's wrong. They went, that's for you. And we get out to the curbside of the airport. It was thousands of Japanese girls just screaming.
Because when we first went to Japan, we expected to see, I don't know, everybody in kimonos or something. And it was just so weird to see a sea of little Japanese girls in these little tartan outfits. It just looked completely bizarre.
In some ways, the essential dynamics of teenage fans have not changed since the days of the Beatles, the New York Times once suggested, adding, the screams partake of the same youthful mix of user-friendly music and rampaging early adolescent hormones. Another thing that hasn't changed is the fickleness of the fans. Though the passion for the pop star of their dreams initially burns hot, the average lifespan of a teen idol is about 3 years. But still, the screams endure for successive generations of boy bands and pop singers.
I believe that if you were to go and get footage from Sinatra, get footage from anybody else in that period, go into the 50s with us, go into the 60s, go in Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, get the footage of any of the girls screaming, just them, you will see that they're all exactly alike.
I mean, well, she was a teenager once too, so I mean, really? I can understand. Yeah, because really, if I have daughters, which I hope, I would do the same thing for them. Like, there's always things I want. I'm like, you know what, Mom? If I have a daughter, I'm gonna let her do that too. So,
Why do girls scream? Well, perhaps after all we have seen and heard, Barry Williams was right.
Why do girls scream? Feels good.
As long as there's young girls, there will be young boy bands. They may take on different configurations, but as long as there's young girls on this planet, there will be young, good-looking boys selling movies, records, television, whatever it might be.
I always say I'm not gonna scream. Yeah, but I do. I heard you. I always say I'm not gonna scream. Yes, you do. But I do. I've heard you. I always say I'm not gonna scream. Yes, you do. Totally. But I do. Yeah, you do. I always say I'm not gonna scream. Totally do. But I do. No way. We heard you. Yeah, I've said that. Yes, you did. Yeah. I can't help it. Yeah. I always say I'm not gonna scream. You do not. Yeah. But I do. This is so funny. You. I always say I'm not gonna scream. Okay. Can't help it. But I do. She always liar. I always say I'm not gonna scream. Sure. But I do. No. Totally.
Give